What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to another edition of Just Winging It. This is episode number 12, and you've made it when you have your first repeat guest of the summer. So we just want to say thanks to everybody who's tuned in so far and supported the show, and hopefully it's kept you entertained up to this point. Our first repeat guest is none other than the head coach of your Kalamazoo Wings, Nick Bootland. Booter, thanks for doing this again. Same spot. How's everything going since we last talked to you 12 weeks ago? What's new in the life?
Well, first of all, I guess it's everyone else must be on vacation this week or something. Couldn't find anybody else to jump on, Pete? So I got to go back. Now I'm up for my second time, second go around.
Forte is going to give me a hard time.
So definitely, you should have Forte on. I mean, it'd be interesting, that video side of things, and what's going on in the life of Kyle Forte would be pretty cool, actually. So. Working on his golf game, I know that for sure. He's trying to catch up to you, Peach. So
maybe that's why we waited. We want to make sure he's up to our level, before we get him on the show. His golf game's got to be good enough.
So, well, yeah, he swings it real hard. That's for sure. He's got a real aggressive approach with his senior flex shafts he's got on his new clubs. So, not bad for a 28-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. How have you been staying busy during this? Because now we're 3 months into it.
Yeah, I think we started when we first started. I think the webinars from the NHLCA were out, and I think we did like 6 weeks straight of those. And then we had they put on another clinic based on when the NHL draft was supposed to be, right? So the draft was supposed to already happen. So they had 15 different webinars in 1 week. So it was sort of like what it would have been. We go to that draft every year, the NHL draft, and then we go to the clinic as well when you're there. And usually you have those 15 speakers over a day and a half, and they cram it all in. I actually kind of enjoyed it a lot. It was much better this way. It was spread out. You didn't have to watch them live if you didn't want to. So they were doing 3 a day. So it was really interesting to listen to those and listen to guys do that. I played a little bit of golf, not as much as I wish I was playing more. I can't figure out why I'm not playing more yet. I don't have a logical reason for it. Spending a little bit of time by the new pool at the new house, so that's exciting to have such a beautiful June that we've had. Next year to be 64 the whole month of June, and I won't want to be by my pool. So we've taken advantage of that for sure. And I think the other thing is I got kind of an exciting project. Travis Green and I were talking on the phone, and he gave me a project to critique his team, the Vancouver Canucks. And I know he did that with a lot of his staff members, gave him different jobs throughout the league. And he asked me to critique their team defensively, all 5-on-5 aspects in every zone. And so that took up a big bulk of my time, obviously an opportunity to showcase your talent, or hopefully your talent, to an NHL coach. And I think it ended up, I got a little bit of help from Kyle Forte and Joel Martin. We ended up watching every goal against for them like we did with our team. And then I put together a 2-page memo, plus I think it was like 23 slides and over 70 or 80 clips to sort of back up my findings, and was able to present that and have conversations with Travis. So, so that was kind of a unique thing for me, for sure, to sort of get that hands-on experience, and it was kind of exciting. And then at the same time, obviously the recruiting trail, players I would say are non-committal at this point. And, I think we do have signings. We're not going to tell you about them yet, of course, because that's not my job to tell you. But, I think we're excited with the group we have going forward.
That's a good point about the signings. We got our first question of the summer already. So I always see when that date hits, when our first, hey, when are we going to get a player signing happens? Normally it's when other teams start making their first couple signings, but we want to make sure there is a season, and then we know when it starts before we start announcing players, if we're being honest about that part. You brought up a lot of good touch points we're going to get into during the show. The first one is just golf. You said you haven't played as much as normal. You played around. I got a chance to play with you and Joel Martin and Michael McFadden. Did you hustle all of us? I mean, was that just
that wasn't even my idea to play. I just happened to have a half decent day, and everyone else seemed to have an off day at the right time. So I'm not going to lie. I did feel a little bad taking your money, knowing that you needed a haircut so bad. So
I mean, look at it. It's getting closer to Mitch by the day.
You got some flow, man. If you put that hockey helmet on, it'd be flying out the back now. So, yeah, Joe Martin has since won some money back, so I don't feel bad for that guy. That's for sure.
Good.
We're kind of back and forth, and I'm sure the next time we go out, you've got game though. I was impressed. I've heard a little bit about your hockey game, so I didn't have that much of an expectation for your golf game. But you're a good golfer. You got some game. I know Tim Heinbaugh, who's just the man behind as normal. I mean, I know he brought out the ball cap for a little session last week and showed everybody, but he's got some game too. He's got some golf. He keeps that ball in play, and he's got some touch. So I could use some touch. I actually stepped up, and my kids kind of combined my birthday, and it hasn't even been my birthday, but my birthday gift, my Father's Day gift, kind of all combined, and bought new irons and a new driver and a 3-wood, and it's the first time my stuff was 13 years old. So I think I got my money's worth. So I finally stepped up and got some new stuff. So my game's actually pretty bad now because technology is a lot better. Bad thing to happen. I hit the ball a little farther than I was before.
I know, right?
I just can't
Now
figure
you got
that.
to catch up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, with me, you just have to set your expectations extremely low and then go from there. I mean, you're used to Joe Roberts, where he's a pretty good hockey player, pretty good golfer, pretty good broadcaster.
Better golfer. Better golfer, trash talking hockey player, average announcer. But I still loved him. I think you got the broadcasting down, and then you're definitely a better golfer than hockey player. But you've got game, my friend. You
mentioned the family. How are Christine and the kids holding up? Are you guys looking ahead to this? Is the school year going to be affected at all by all this going on? Or are you guys kind of waiting in the wings to find out?
Yeah, I mean, we had some conversations. Obviously, my daughter is a little unknown still with school. I know there's a lot of her friends are getting some answers from some schools and things like that. And there's some guys that, I'm hearing that a lot of their classes are going to be online. My daughter's going to move back to this side of the state regardless. She's going to be going to school in Kalamazoo again. So that's kind of fun for us that she'll be a little closer. I think right now she's living with us. I think she'll move out probably in August and take her little puppy with her. So we're not going to be sad about that at all. And I'm kidding. I have to give my daughter a hard time, but I end up loving the dog, and the dog and I spend a lot of time in the morning when everybody's still sleeping together. So, but I got to be that dad who gives a hard time because it's not my dog. So we're not a little unknown there. And then Brecken, obviously, what's it going to look like, school wise? I don't know. It feels like it just finished for them. Really. I think it's only been a week and a half that they've been out, and I think that was trying for kids, especially anything, I think 16 and under, it was a pretty difficult time for those kids to go through that. And I'm pretty fortunate that my kids are both pretty motivated for school. And even my son, who's very motivated and excels in school, was struggling at times to, with normal tasks and had some hiccups in here. And he's never really had hiccups when it came to school. And then obviously the social aspect, in my view, is, one of the most important pieces of that. Right. So, I think it was 7 weeks. The poor kid went to Chick-fil-A twice in the car, and then the rest of the time he's at home and he's got no sports and no buddies around. And then you become lazy when you don't have friends to play with. And you only want to play with your dad for so long when you're a 14-year-old boy, you know what I mean? So you're going to throw the football twice a day, shoot some hockey pucks here and there. And then after that, he's like, yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Dad. It's not like he's 6 and he wants to play mini sticks for 12 hours with you anymore. So I think it was really tough on that age. And, everybody's working now. Daughter's working a couple of jobs. My wife's back to work, obviously, with the restaurant business being at 50% or low capacity. And so it's starting to feel a little bit more normal, coming into the rink a little more often. Staff is starting to come into the rink. I was pretty much coming in all the time to make sure that there's no leaks in this old building, and everybody else was kind of supporting and coming in. So, but they're doing well. It's some time, I think, a year from now, 2 years from now, hopefully things are whatever the new normal is going to be. I think we're going to look back and feel really fortunate to have spent that much time with your family and your kids. And I mean, of course, everybody has their moments. There's some days I think I pulled a couple pieces out, but at the same time, it was fantastic to be able to be home and have dinner every night. And it was just a different way of life than what we're used to. And, what's important, right? I mean, what's important really is, that fast-paced life that we live where we're nonstop running to every sporting event in the world, or, is it that important to do that, or is it more fun to be around your family? And, I think there's somewhere in between is probably the answer.
One of the big reasons we wanted to get you on again, especially right around now, because things really start to pick up for you guys from a contract standpoint, as you're saying, with player signings and just the pieces that the ECHL has in place and the deadlines, right? Sometimes can be confusing to fans, and it can be confusing to us too. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I have to look at every year I go through it again, and I look at how the protected list works and how the season-ending roster goes and how the qualifying offers happen, what that means. And I think it's kind of a nice way to educate the fan base a little bit too, that maybe has questions about that. So if you're okay with talking about it, I mean, the protected list, from my understanding, is just basically can include anybody, right? You can almost include almost your whole roster.
Well, essentially, there is no limit to the original protected list that's due out June 1st, right? There's no limit to that. Even guys you qualified on the previous year that you didn't sign or didn't even play in our league, you can put on that protected list. And one of the reasons they have it that way is, you can't hide anyone, right? So if you don't put them on your protected list, they can't sign on your team until 3 weeks into the season. So you couldn't shrink your lists a little bit. So if you owed futures to someone, let's take the example. We kind of knew that Joel Martin was going to play in Kalamazoo for extended period of time. And, if we didn't protect him, he was going to sign with us anyway. But if you had a futures deal in place and you didn't put him on the futures, that would be a player where maybe I was allowed to protect 8 players. Well, that would be kind of like cheating because I protected Joel Martin because he wasn't on the list as well. So they kind of do that process to put that in place. Then you can have your qualified guys from the year before that didn't sign on your next list, which is your season-ending roster, which has to be 20. Normally, there's not really decisions to make because normally we have enough affiliated players and we don't have enough players left on our roster. But go ahead if you want to add something.
I was going to ask you, so basically the guys you qualified last summer, guys that did not sign, so they either retired or they went overseas, like Chris Collins or Chad Van Allen. No. You had them qualified, I believe, or at least Collins, okay, right? So you could still keep him on your protected list, the original list for this summer, but you couldn't have him on the season-ending roster at that point, is what you're saying.
That's correct. So I'm not even sure why that even happens, to be honest, because they can't be on your season-ending roster anyway. But I'm not sure the rule or why that rule's in place. So yes, Chris Collins was on our protected list. Van Allen was on our protected list. Matt Joyo was on our protected list, and all have done different things. 2 of them retired. 1 went to Europe. And, they're not allowed to be on your next roster because you don't maintain their rights for more than a year. If that makes sense.
So your 20-man roster is the maximum for this one that came out a week or 2 ago, and it was the mid-June deadline. Some teams have fewer than that. Some teams have the 20 maximum. We have the 20. But you can't include AHL or NHL guys on there. So a few fans ask questions, where's Jake Kiley? Well, he was under contract with Vancouver last year, so we couldn't keep him on the season-ending roster. Same with an Aaron Tho or a Zach Fry or a Tanner Sorensen. We're under contract with Utica. So you basically took a list of however many players you had, 20 to 24 or 25. You could pick 20. And those are ones that we get the rights to essentially for this 2-week signing period?
Essentially, that's right. So no one else should be able to talk to those players. It should be tampering if another ECHL team is talking to those guys. You have an opportunity to negotiate contracts in this 2-week window. And which we have signed some of those players. And then from there, you would make your next step, right? Your next step would be your qualifying offer. So you have exactly right. So normally, I don't think we've had to use all 20 spots before because normally when the season ends, you have a tendency to have most of your AHL guys down at the end of the year because they're getting new players and you have your number, your NHL, AHL number is usually fairly high. When we happen to have our season abruptly end, some of our guys were up, and so we had more ECHL contracted guys around. We also had 5 guys or 6 guys on the IR that happened to be, one happened to be an American League contract. The others were all ECHL contracts. So we had a larger number than 20. So we had to go down and make a decision. So if you don't put someone on your protected your season-ending roster, sorry, you can't sign those players the following year until after 3 weeks of hockey has been played. Again, a way not to hide players. Same example as the Joel Martin example earlier in the interview, essentially.
Right. So 3 names that I've heard some rumbling about that just didn't play a lot for us last year or at all, but we had their rights. So you had them on the season-ending roster. A guy like Logan Lambden played 1 game, then the season got canceled. He was a rookie out of Michigan State. You had just signed a guy by the name of Brian Basilica the day of that last game, and then the season got canceled, so he never got to play. But we had his rights. And then a guy like Will Petchnig, you claimed off of waivers from Fort Wayne, so we had his rights. But at the time, the season was kind of in limbo, and he never ended up coming to Kalamazoo at that point. But those guys can be included too because of the way it played out with their contracts last year, correct?
Yeah, so essentially they were on our roster, right? So all 3 of those guys were on our roster. The Will one was kind of a unique situation where there was there was actually a death in his family, or someone who was sick who ended up passing away in his family. So he didn't report to Kalamazoo right away. He went home. So I'm not sure what would have happened if the league had lasted 3 or 4 more days. But he's a guy we claimed off waivers. He was a defenseman. He was 6'2" or 6'3", and we played a little bit against him. And so we decided to put him on that list. We think there might be some value there, and haven't had a conversation with him, to be 100% honest. And then Brian Basilico had 1 practice with us. It was an optional practice. There was 6 players on the ice. And then we had to fold the season up. So that was kind of unique. A player that we got at Lake State, if I'm not mistaken, University. So he's a bigger bodied guy too as well. And then obviously Logan Lambden played 1 game for us, but we liked what we saw. We thought there was some tenacity in his game. There was some, he's not his overall speed wasn't incredible, but I think he has the dart ability, if that makes sense. So, he has the ability to jump to a hole and have some tenacity in his game. And I think his game looks like it's going to translate well to being a pro hockey player.
Did you have any tough decisions in getting it to 20?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there's a name we left off the list in Luke Sandler, and he's obviously played for us for 2 years. And I know there's been some rumblings. I've seen some people here and there at a grocery store that have asked me. 1 person at the restaurant asked me, and, where our decision was based. And, we first off appreciate the 2 years that he gave us, and he worked hard, and he's a guy who finished checks. And do I think we need to be a tougher team overall? I think, yeah, if we could find a way to be tougher and be team tough, we'd like to be. So when you get rid of a guy who finishes all his checks and plays kind of hard-nosed, it might be a little bit different. But I felt like the message wasn't being read by him on a consistent basis. I feel like the conversations we had with Luke were similar time and time again, with the things that we didn't like about his game and the areas where we wanted him to improve. He had a pretty good year for us. I think we took way too many penalties. I think he was a key contributor in that factor. And the best way to kill a penalty is not to get penalties. That's the truth. And, that's an area that we really need to focus on and get better at. And we had to make the decision. And we, at this point, when we had to make a decision, June 15th, we're non-committal on whether we were going to bring a Luke Sandler back. So doing the right thing, we decided not to string him along and give him an opportunity to look for a job elsewhere.
The next step's the qualifying offers, and it's coming up here, I believe June 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So right around the corner. Essentially, you get up to 8. Up to 4 of those can be vets, guys who have played 260 pro games or more going into next season. Now, how does that work with keeping their rights? So you give them an offer, the qualifying offer, which is basically their salary last year plus a set amount in a nutshell.
Yep.
But then if they don't sign it, you can negotiate with those players or at least keep their rights, not including the vets, right, at a certain point?
Yeah, so essentially to keep a player's rights, you have to offer them a 5% raise. So I think some people in the real world would say a 5% raise on a yearly basis would be pretty nice, for sure. But to keep their rights, you have to give them that. And that qualifying offer stands for that 15-day window until July 15th or 16th or whatever it is. And then it can be negotiated for a different price after that. A veteran player, if you qualify a veteran, he becomes a restricted free agent from July 16th until the July 30th. And then as of August 1st, he becomes a free agent if you don't agree or you guys can't agree to sign. So I think that's just the fairness of not being able to trap vets in situations where they don't want to be in anymore. I think there has to be a time for that. But any other player that's not a veteran, if you don't sign him, you have his rights for the remainder of that full season if you'd like, to try and keep that player on your roster or to acquire that player. So Chris Collins would be the example. Last year we gave him a 5% raise. We actually offered him more money than that, but he took an opportunity to go to Europe instead. We wanted to keep his rights just in case he didn't like his situation. So, I'm not sure if we'll get to 8 or we'll use all 8. It'll depend on how the next week goes here. As we're trying, I guess this will come out right when it's, so it'll come out probably next Monday. Is that what we're looking at here? So
right around the time this airs.
Right. So, there won't be a week at that point. So it'll depend on how the week prior to that goes with some of the negotiations that we're having with players and individuals and guys that we have slated to come back with a high interest. So there'll be a number of guys that we think will be coming back, and then we'll qualify those that we deem assets or deem that we want to keep no matter what.
So again, just so fans don't freak out, just because I do some studying too when this process happens. If you don't see your favorite player on the qualifying offer list that we put out there, it doesn't mean they haven't already signed, because that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah, right? Essentially that's right. So and if you don't sign those players and or you don't qualify those players, then those players at July 1st time would become free agents.
Appreciate you clarifying all that stuff, because again, there's so much language in kind of how all this works that I know it can kind of bottle things up, and it makes it kind of tough to understand sometimes. So in a perfect world, I guess, from last year's team, I mean, do you have a set number, like a ballpark number of the amount of guys you'd want to bring back from last year's team? Because I remember last year the theme was culture, and I know that culture is always important here in Kalamazoo. You want high character individuals playing for your team. So I'm sure that doesn't change. But as far as the quality of player on the ice from what you guys have seen and studied, do you have a ballpark number?
I don't really have a number. I think the biggest thing for me right now is that we haven't been good enough and we need to get better, right? So I think we'll be a younger team. That's the way it's trending. Sitting here in June, that we'll be younger than we have been. I think we'll still have some of our key core guys that'll be back that, bleed our culture and play with identity. I think that's important to us. But overall, it hasn't been good enough, and our job is to win hockey games and develop hockey players. And I think we'll be a younger team because we're going to be a little hungrier and we need to make some adjustments. But I think there'll be some familiar faces. I don't think there has to start a panic mode, that's for sure. But I really don't have a number at this point. I don't think we go in with a set plan to say, okay, I think we need 8 guys from this year's team. I think that just kind of happens as the conversations happen and as we go through the process, and to be 100% honest, could be guys that come back that, during training camp, if we've done our job, that might not have jobs by the end of the year and by the end of training camp. And we've seen that happen before too here in Kalamazoo, where someone came back and then we're releasing them or moving them on at that time. So, it's all part of that inner competition that we're trying to create on a daily basis.
I always like to use the term blue chip free agent at this level, because there's still a developmental league, and its free agency is so different from the higher levels, especially with the amount of players you can protect and the amount of players that'll re-sign right away and the veteran limit. Last summer, an example would be a Matty Icapelli that we signed as a free agent, or a Yannick Veilleux, or a Boston Lear. I mean, those are blue chip free agents that you guys worked hard to get to sign here in Kalamazoo. What qualifies? Is it a player that comes back from overseas that maybe you have your eyes on as far as the recruiting process goes when you want to bring somebody new in?
Well, we've scoured obviously American League expiring contracts. First of all, that's usually where we first start. So we've scoured that league to see who, younger players, maybe first, second year guys where their deals are expiring, even expiring NHL contracts. That's why we got like a Ganley a couple years ago when his contract expired. This year, I think there's been a higher emphasis on the European players because of the unknown of what's going to happen or possibly could happen over there, where there could be some leagues that are not going to start or not even having seasons, with the rumblings of that happening. I'm pretty comfortable right now saying that we're going to have a season. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I don't know any of those details. So I think we've scoured Europe a little bit more. I think it could be really unique for European players. So let's give an example of, let's take a high-level league like the DEL where Reed Gardner went last year, right? Those players have an expectation to make pretty good money, right? And I don't need to get into the dollars and cents of it, but they're pretty high-end paid players, especially those import picks that are going to those places. Well, with the change, it could be something where guys at that level maybe are only offering half the salary, where some of those higher profile guys might not want to go to Germany for that type of money, which then might give an opportunity from someone from another lower level league to go to a higher league to play. So it sounds like there could be a lot of extra guys around, but it sounds like there maybe not being. So there's a ton of unknown, which has been a very unique summer. I think one of the things that you got to realize is the blue chip guys are there because they're expiring contracts, but those blue chip guys there's 27 teams in the league going after the same guys, right? So that makes it a little difficult. And then when you look at free agency, let's just say in this window from June 15th to the June 30th, we sign 8 players from last year's team. Let's just throw a number out there. Then we qualify 8 players, let's say. So now we're at 16 players from our 20-man roster. Let's just say that. So 4 guys become free agents. Let's say 4 guys on every team become free agents. Well, it's usually the worst 4 players that become free agents, right? So how are you improving your team with those guys? Like the 17th best player on any team is not going to be that impactful anywhere, right? So that's one of the things where it makes it a little bit difficult. Like when I first started coaching in the league, an example would be that the Central League was still out there, right? So there was a league where guys could develop. Maybe it was a tad less than the ECHL, but you could get some pretty good players that could still go back and forth, and there's a few more free agents available to have those good players. So now the window has shrunk on the number of players that are available, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. We do have a fan question from your buddy Jim Panerick, who's chimed in a few times, and it's a good one. I'm going to try to word it the way I think it's worded here is with the season getting canceled, kind of a unique circumstance, the unknown of next season, like you said. I mean, you think we'll have a season for sure. What that means, we'll see. Do you think that's going to force more guys into kind of an early retirement situation than usual, given the fact that if the season starts later, in the job situation, that a lot of players will have a summer job? You think that's going to affect kind of the retiring players?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could affect the number of players that want to pursue pro hockey right off the bat, right? Because now if you have a college free agent who's been done since the same time we've been done, let's say who was a senior and he's finished, and now we decide to start in December, hypothetically, and he's like, wow, man, I don't want to wait. That's a really long time since I played hockey again, maybe if he ends up finding a job that makes sense, I think it'll have less players be involved. And I love the ECHL. I know that they had hard decisions to make. I respect that they had to close down the league, but the fact that our players didn't get paid and, they didn't end up paying those guys, I think that's a factor that could scare guys away as well, into either retirement and or not pursuing the game. If you're at the American Hockey League level, you got paid. If you're in the NHL, you got paid. So if all of a sudden you're in a league where you're not making a ton of money and now you lose out, or if we start and then somehow it shuts down again, it's not a comforting feeling for anyone, right? So I think it definitely could affect the numbers for sure.
Have you heard of anything from our guys as far as guys retiring yet or going overseas, guys that won't be back? I mean, you don't have to call out anybody, but
No, I think there's been a lot of guys that have expressed trying to make adjustments in their career. I've had some calls from past players that have shown interest in maybe coming back because of the uncertainty in certain areas. And then I've had guys from last year's team that have been with us for a while that are thinking, well, maybe to prolong my career, I should go to Europe. Excuse me.
So, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just trying to fill the buffer.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. I think it works both ways, I guess, is where I was going with that.
So last time we spoke, you and Joel Martin and Kyle Forte were working on breaking down every single goal against from last year. And we talked about finding out how each goal occurred, how we can be better and grow from there. Then you said you were going to break down kind of our opponents' goals against on video. And I wanted to lead into that, what you just mentioned earlier in the show about doing that for the Vancouver Canucks and kind of critiquing their defensemen. How far did you guys get in that process over the last 12 weeks since we talked, and how much did you learn?
I think it's a process that we'll do every time. We've watched every single goal for, every single goal against, every single power play, every single penalty kill. I think when you watch it in repetition, I think it's easier to critique your team. So when you watch the penalty kill, for instance, just from the night before, because we're preparing for the next day, and you watch it, you're like, okay, make this tweak and this tweak and this tweak. Okay, we're good. We'll show these two. I think these are the two areas that need to get better. We need to do better up ice pressure, and we need to make sure that we don't get beaten a seam in our zone. So then we show that. But when you sit down and you watch consecutively every single one, I think it's going to make us, or it's going to challenge us to get better as coaches. So you have a tendency to recognize that, okay, you make those tweaks, you go on to the next game. Okay, now you make these tweaks and you make this game. But when you watch it, bing, 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 over and over and over and over again, you're like, oh man, maybe we need to actually change this because this is continually happening, you know, or maybe we need to create a drill that simulates this area. So I think it's really helped us immensely with the process. I think you really get to know a team. It also gives you a starting point. So we did top team, a friend of mine's team, Huntsville down Southern Pro League. We did all their goals against. We did South Carolina, who's one of the best defensive teams in our league. We did all their goals against. We did the Vancouver Canucks and all their goals against. We did another American League team and we did all their goals against. We did goals for, and then it gave us ideas on where to start on what to look for, right? So now you go in and you watch some games and now you have the ability to say, okay, based on these numbers, we weren't a very good defensive team last year. The Kalamazoo Wings, we allowed way too many goals for, right? Areas of concern, penalty kill in zone, defending the rush, D-zone coverage at times. You know, is it the system or is it our decision making? Those are the next steps on what we have to decide. But when you look at the numbers, now we have set variables on where standards are, right? Huntsville is a pretty good offensive team, where their numbers compare to what South Carolina was a really good defensive team, the Vancouver Canucks. So it really gives us areas that you could sort of pull out right off the bat to start to look at, almost like the low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, to start looking at and try to get better. So the review process was fantastic. I think it really helps doing it. I thought it was going to be tedious and not really get us anywhere, to be honest, at times, because you think you have a great feel for what's going on with your group and where you are. And obviously you've been doing it for your whole life, so you think you got a great feel. But when you watch it all back to back like that, it really shows your areas that you can improve on, and then we're looking at ideas on how to create. There's a ton of projects that we've done since then to try and be better, and ideas that you've had for years that, you know, time constraint is maybe the excuse you use for not getting it finished. And a good example is we have a penalty kill presentation that Joel really ran with and did a lot of the PowerPoint work for it and put some video together, and really it could be an hour-long presentation. Now, we would never show it in its entirety to our team in an hour-long setting, but it's every aspect of the penalty kill that you can think of that is structured and have a better feel for, you know, whereas you did that, but you broke it out piece by piece. Now it's all in one place, and we're going to do that throughout all the rest of our systems as we make decisions on how we're going to play.
This summer, from a team standpoint, I don't know if you guys have been paying close attention from the Bootland household or not, but the team awards typically take place in the arena last game of the season. We rolled them out on social media because that was all we could really do to still acknowledge some of the players that stood out this year. Now, you and the coaching staff obviously were involved in the voting process, and the fans voted. What do you think? I mean, Justin Taylor takes home a few awards. Ian Edmondson, Rookie of the Year. Ben Wilson, Defenseman of the Year. Matt Icapelli, Unsung Hero. Zach Diamond Tony, Most Improved. Jake Kiley, Sportsmanship Award, Boston Lair Community. Any qualms with that? I mean, is that a pretty good list right there? Is there any names that were left off that you think deserve a little kudos?
Well, I think there's guys that could have won those, other players that could have won some of those awards. I don't think any one of these guys really ran away with it. Obviously, Justin had a knack for, scoring big goals for us and always has. It's crazy that the year that he wins it is probably his worst point production year that he's had. And I don't think that's really his fault. I think we had a tough year and it wasn't the year that we wanted. So, but he has a knack for scoring big goals. So those guys are going to get rewarded. I thought Ike Capelli was, a good pick. I think his second half was outstanding. If he took his second half and we could stretch that into a full season, I think we would be really, really excited what that looks like. And that's what we thought we were getting. It just took a little while to get him going and get that confidence up. And once he found his game, I think he went through a pretty tough year the year before, and I think he started fragile, and I think he learned to grow from that. So I think that was huge. I think Diamond Tony was, he's a guy who's, found a way to be an everyday player when he wasn't an everyday player the year before, right? And I think there's still an opportunity for him to grow. I think there's an opportunity for him to create a little more offense than he did. But his work ethic is contagious, and he fits that. And Boston Lear, you can't say enough about the type of guy he is, and the type of leader he is, and the type of locker room presence that he has, and the intensity that he brings on a daily basis. And so that's exciting. I think every individual, deserved it. Ben Wilson, Defenseman of the Year. Ben Wilson, when he first started in this league, could not play against top lines. And that was a true fact. And he might disagree with me, but he couldn't, and, he's grown into not just a great leader, but he's grown into a very, very reliable defenseman, and his game has improved. And he's a way better player now than he was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even the year before. I think this is the best year he had, from a consistency basis, from a work ethic basis, and just from his overall game. And less mistakes. So, I think everybody was certainly deserving. I think there was guys that could contribute there in different ways and could have won those different awards. But, I think the fans, and we only get one vote, I think the voting was pretty fair.
Thoughts on this NHL Hub City for playoffs deal that's going on? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think it's going to push back our season, and especially kind of with some of the health concerns right now, teams getting some positive tests?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert. I think it would be really exciting to watch playoff hockey, and selfishly by my pool, actually. So that would be kind of nice. I might have to figure out how to put the TV out there, and especially that first 2 weeks, right? Who doesn't love the first 2 weeks of the NHL playoffs when there's 3 games a night and every day there's hockey, and the intensity level is insanely high, and who doesn't love that time of year, right? So for me, from a fan perspective, I would love to see them finish the year. I think it would be fantastic. I would be less busy. I would be able to focus a little bit more on being the fan and watching it, as opposed to playing and coaching your team and not having the time to do that, without, having very little sleep already. We already have very little sleep on a busy weekend. So, it's tough to be that fan that you want to be. Hub City, I guess that's trying to condense it, and trying to put it in one place and trying to be smart. I think the less interaction and the less movement. And I know that there's some strict guidelines talking to Vancouver, like there's not going to be any extras around. They're definitely not allowing me to go be part of it like I was hoping that I could be. I was trying to put my nose in there a little bit, but that's definitely not going to happen. I heard rumblings of, just a player number of them allowing like 32 players. So now you talk about 50 people only for a team. There's a lot of people that are important that are being left out if you think about that, right? You think about just how large coaching staffs are, and then you add their training staffs and all the medical staff, and now you're talking about a GM and the assistant GM, and then beyond that, what's left? There's not a lot of room for, and I guess the example would be when we flew from Vancouver to over to Victoria for training camp. They had a chartered plane that was full. there was 100 and something people there. Now, I think Vancouver did it really well, where they take a lot of their sales staff and people like that and let them allow them to be part of that process. And it's a very team building thing for them as a group. But I look at how many people are on that plane, and they're not going to have half that plane with them. So, I think that's kind of insane. Now, I get both sides of things. I understand how things work. It's not an easy thing for someone to be away from their family as a player for 90 to 100 days, coaching staff 90 to 100 days, training staff 90 to 100 days away from family, possibly. And, I understand there's big contracts. I understand that, TV contracts are big money, and I understand that escrow would be big money. So that hurts the players. And, I don't know. I'm not in that seat to have great insight, I guess. I just hope that at some point we can get back. And I think really what I'm hoping for, I think it's just to provide hope for people and, to be part of that process and, be that escape for someone. I would love for them to say that we can play safely, and they feel we can play safely, so that people could, forget about it for 2.5 hours.
Got a couple last easy ones before we wrap it up. Winterfest was announced, obviously, in Toledo. We played in the first ever outdoor game in Toledo a few years back, and you were the coach then, and Joel Martin actually was the goaltender for the winning team. How are we going to keep Marty warm? I hear his feet get really cold, and he said something about a trench coat and foot warmers or something. So is that your job now that he's on the bench next to you? He
literally had, electronic foot warmers in his skates when he played that game as the starting goalie. This is not a lie. The trainer had control with a button, high, medium, low, or off. And he's like, I think at one point he's like, turn these things on. He came to he is he's always cold. So maybe that's because he's skinnier than me, and maybe it doesn't bother me. There's a couple arenas that I'm like, it's pretty cold in Wheeling. It's pretty cold in Brampton. There's a couple places where it gets pretty chilly. But my juices are pretty flowing, and sometimes I'm pretty loud out there, so it goes away pretty fast. I usually get cold after because you get hot in a leather shoe, and you start to sweat a little bit because you're in the game and your intensity takes over. Then that's when I get cold. For me, sometimes after an intermission and I go back out there, I'm a little chilly, but it's a lot of fun. Those outdoor games, to have the ability to be part of it once before. And, I think it's something we use as a recruiting tool, even to be part of that. Not every player is going to get an opportunity to do that in their career. I know it's pretty common now at the NHL level that almost everybody that's going to play there at some point, if you're going to play there for an extended period of time, you're going to get an opportunity to do so. And obviously there's some high-end D1 programs that have done it, and some American League teams that have done it. But, we've only had 2 games ever at our level. And now we'll be the 3rd game ever, and we'll get to be part of that. It's truly exciting. And both organizations do a fantastic job. Toledo does an amazing job hosting the event. The way they're supported downtown and the way that they support us. And we also schedule-wise create some days off in between, so we can treat it a little bit like an NHL setup. And I know it's probably going to be our first skate of the year, but it'll be really short. We'll do a couple drills, and then I'm going to tell our players to invite family, and I'm going to tell our players to invite their kids and their parents if they want to. And, we might have a short window of ice that's only going to be an hour long, but we're going to share it, and it's about the experience just as much as it is about the game.
Last one is this is our 12th episode of the show. You've been on 2 of them. How many of them have you watched? Do you have a favorite guest that the way it went? If not, I don't want to put you on the spot if you haven't watched any of them. But
I think I've watched 9. I think I know I've missed one for sure. Maybe 2 I've missed. But I go backtrack. I think our best fan for Winging It is Richard Krause, old Shaky. Seems to text me every Monday. He actually texted me when Tim was on there and McFadden was on there. He texts me every week about something that happened. So he actually almost engages me to watch them, because he usually texts me about something that was funny that happened, and then I go back and watch them. I think they're fun. I think it's great insight. I think it's, I remember when I first started doing radio interviews, and you went on and you did maybe the Rocker Morning Show, which I've done or whatever, and they usually have you in there for about 7 minutes, right? And then they're like, okay, good. I'm like, really? That's it? And I would actually stay longer. And they'd be like, you want to stay? I'm like, sure. I'd stay there for like an hour. And it's just, it's question and Q&A is easy for me. I enjoy it. I love the interaction. I love hanging out. I love giving people a hard time like you and Peach, and having fun with it. But I think everybody did a great job. And I think Marty's was pretty cool, and Mitch's was pretty cool when you guys were bringing up their acting skills, and they have some talents, both of them, that I certainly don't have. And maybe it's not just their acting careers, but they're fantastic at those. I thought those were really funny, and I think you guys are doing a great job, and I think really people appreciate it. Again, it's a nice distraction, but it's a really good look in, and it's an honest look at who people are. I think that's what's exciting about them, and you get a real honest take when it ends up being whatever, anything over half an hour to an hour long. You're not faking it. You're out there having fun. We're just having a conversation, and sometimes you forget the camera's there. Even Tim's directing me to get in the picture a little more sometimes and stuff like that.
Wrap it up. I'm just kidding.
Keep it going. So, I think it's a lot of fun. I was surprised that I was doubled up on here. I'm sorry that everyone else said no to you. I'm sorry that everybody had to listen to me again. But it was a lot of fun.
That's my last bit. You can choose who our next player guest is from last year's team that you think would be a good guest to have on the show. And I'll text that player right after we're done here and line it up. Or if you have an alumni from the last 12 years as head coach of the team, if you have a good former player, that would be a good guest.
Oh, man, that's a great question, actually. You know who would be awesome, and I don't know if we can get him, but Jordan Binnington would be a lot of fun, and Binny, I mean, he's if you've seen any of his interviews, he's a very candid guy. He enjoys it. He loves to have fun. He'd be a lot of fun to have. Obviously, he's a Stanley Cup winner. I'm not sure if we could lock him down. But maybe if we put this little tidbit on social media, copy him on Twitter, those people are involved in the Kalamazoo Wings Twitter account, and maybe if we pounded him hard about it and got on him on social media, we might be able to wing it and have him on the next guest or somewhere down the line that works with his schedule before it gets too crazy. I think he'd be a lot of fun.
I love it. Thanks as always. This was a blast, and someday down the road, you might have to be our first third repeat guest.
Oh man!
Once we make our way through, we got to get to Forte first, though. And
I'm not coming back on until you get a haircut, so that's for sure.
It's gonna be a while then.
We got to play some golf again too. I'll give you a chance to win some of your money back. Thanks, boys.